Crime intelligence boss Richard Mdluli is considering appealing his guilty verdict. He and his co-accused Mthembeni Mthunzi were found guilty in the Johannesburg High Court on charges related to the 1999 kidnapping and assault of Oupa Ramogibe. Ramogibe was shot dead in 1999, but nobody has been charged for his murder. Ramogibe was married to Mdluli's former lover. Both were acquitted on charges of intimidation and defeating the ends of justice. Mdluli was found guilty of 2 counts of kidnapping, 2 of common assault, and 2 of assault with intent to do grievous bodily harm. His co-accused, Mthunzi, was found guilty of 2 counts of kidnapping, 2 of common assault, and 2 counts of assault to do grievous bodily harm as well. Mdluli has always maintained the case against him was a political conspiracy. The Ramogibe family, still without closure, wouldn't talk to the media. Arguments in mitigation and aggravation of sentence are now expected tomorrow. So let's talk a little bit more about those developments in courts. Earlier on, Chriselda Lewis, SABC reporter, was there. She joins us now in the studio. So this has been long running, Chriselda, 4 years on. What has taken so long?
Look, Tepi, so there have been multiple allegations of conspiracy against the former crime intelligence boss, Richard Mdluli. And where on the other side, he would say there have been delaying tactics on the part of the state to get his day in court. And amongst all of that, you would recall that Richard Mdluli's office, him at the time being the head of crime intelligence, there was a lot that needed to be investigated regarding who was responsible for the so-called allegations that were being made against him. And it had just dragged on and on and on and on. But I guess the court ultimately found at the end of the day that with some of the investigations that took place, I mean, allegations as well throughout this trial of witnesses being fed with information. So it's been really dramatic to this point.
So the judge saying on the basis of evidence, he was able to find the 2 men guilty on those charges. What evidence was presented before the court that they would find them guilty of those particular charges that we mentioned earlier on?
Relating to assault and to assault to cause grievous bodily harm, and on the issue of kidnapping, some of the witnesses had spoken out about how all this had taken place. Remember initially that Richard Mdluli had said that this was nothing but a political conspiracy, even though there had been links between him and Ramogibe, the woman that Ramogibe then went on to marry. No one should be pinning him. Initially, we must recall the more charge of murder was something that was lingering on his back together with his co-accused. But of course, all of that fell away due to a lack of evidence. And essentially, what the court believes is that the political conspiracy also that Richard Mdluli, through his lawyers, has been punching all along. He said that he found that there's absolutely no basis for that. So on the other issues pertaining to kidnapping and to assault, they believed that the evidence that was put before the court was sufficient to suggest that indeed they should be found guilty of that.
So, as you mentioned earlier on, the Ramogibe family dissatisfied with that outcome. What are they feeling? What are they saying?
When I spoke to them, Tshepise, in court, at first they did not want to speak before the judgment, but shortly after you could sense a lot of disappointment on their faces, because ultimately at the end of the day somebody died here and there are still no answers pertaining to how Oupa Ramogibe died. On the issue of assault, one could perceive those as lesser charges if you're a family member who's lost their loved ones. So they really didn't seem quite happy with what happened today. But I did have an exclusive interview with Richard Mdluli, which will play in the next bulletins, where I asked him if he'll be challenging this verdict. He said he would. And I asked him as well about the political conspiracy. He did not want to allude much to that, but did say he will be talking to his lawyers about issues pertaining to political conspiracy about him, but he will be taking this matter much further.
So in his appeal, did he indicate on what basis he feels that the ruling ought to be overturned?
Well, he certainly didn't go much into that, Tshepise. I think this was just a few moments after the verdict had been read out. So I'd really just rushed to him to get what his sense was after the judgment had been handed down. So he was not really willing to say much, but I'm sure we will be hearing a lot more from Richard Mdluli in the next few days.
Was there any tangible reaction from those who gathered to listen to the ruling? As we said, this has been something that's been dragging on for 4 years, and there's been a lot of speculation around what's going to happen.
Hardly, Tsepi. So apart from the family members that were seated in court, in the majority it had been family members and just journalists that were there. And from the family members, of course, I mean, a sense of anxiety before that verdict had been, judgment had been delivered. And after it had been delivered, you saw them rush through court and not even sit in the corridors outside the court itself. So you could almost, just by looking at those pictures on your screen there, CPC, you can tell that there's a sense of some family members wanting closure. They're wanting such a long journey to come to an end. So if you have a situation where now you have Richard Mdluli, of course he has the right to, if he feels the courts have not treated him fairly, to take this on review, if I can, then certainly the wounds that have not yet closed for the Ramogibe family will continue to fester. They didn't close to begin with. So with what's expected to be a court case which will now once again begin when he challenges the outcome of this, it's without a doubt going to continue opening up those wounds.
So as they say, Chriselda, watch the space. Thank you very much, Chriselda Lewis, SABC reporter on that. Let's take